Welcome into 5-Wide Fantasy. Today, we're getting to the best playoff schedules for wide receivers this season. I'm looking at the top 5 teams. If you guys have a secure playoff spot, have lost very few matchups this season, these are perfect targets to look in the long road for your team to help you win a fantasy championship. If you're still battling for position, aren't quite there yet, these guys might not necessarily be the targets for you, but take a look at their schedule the rest of the way, and perhaps they are as well. These are going to be excellent buy lows or buy highs or just buy at the current price they're at. If you guys are new to the channel, we also dropped our best schedules for running backs last week, so go check that out. Hit that subscribe button if you're looking for more fantasy football content. If you guys enjoyed today's video, would greatly appreciate it if you do hit that like button. Let's get into these 5 teams. First up is the Buffalo Bills. They come in at number 5. They've got the Dallas Cowboys, so a tough matchup, who are 6th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Then they get the Los Angeles Chargers, who are 29th, and the New England Patriots, who are 26th. What I like about this schedule in the postseason for your fantasy league, again, weeks 15, 16, and 17, you should get competitive games as well against Dallas and Los Angeles, which is great for the Bills because when they're in those competitive game scripts, you can expect to see Josh Allen throwing the ball a ton, especially if they're in any losing game scripts. He's going to throw the ball 40 plus times. The Cowboys and Chargers are 2 teams I think can do just that. And the team, like I mentioned, is already throwing the ball a ton. They're throwing the ball 36 times per game, a top 10 rate in the league. So you should see good volume with this team regardless, but against these opponents, definitely expect that to continue. What I want to quickly touch on, because again, I'm giving you more of the schedule and what I think are top 5. I won't necessarily always say who I really think you should target. I want to briefly talk about Gabe Davis because the role has been a little bit concerning the last 4 weeks. He's had less than 5 fantasy points in 3 of 4 games, the outlier being the game with Tampa Bay when he went for 12 targets, 9 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. So it hasn't all been bad, but compared to what we got early in the year, it's definitely not been on that same level. What I do think has played a factor in that is Dalton Kincaid's breakout, being the fact that Dawson Knox isn't on the field. Kincaid is getting on the field a lot more, and it's also bringing Khalil Shakur onto the field, and he's had a bit of a mini breakout here the last couple of weeks as well. And for Kincaid, he's not really a tight end. He plays the position of tight end, but he doesn't perform, at the line of scrimmage making blocks in the run game. Like, he's just out there to run routes. So it's had an impact on Davis. If you're someone who believes in Davis's talent as someone that can, in these matchups, really take advantage, definitely someone to invest in. Like the Chargers give up explosive plays like it's nobody's business. So that could be a good team to target for Davis in particular. But I think this is just a testament to Stephon Diggs. I think he'll really perform well in these 3 matchups. So if there's a chance to buy on him, I am getting this video out to you guys before their Monday matchup. So hopefully nothing impacts how I feel about this wide receiver group. But I mean, any of Davis or Diggs are worth investing in. I think you can get Davis at a cheap price where Diggs is just Diggs. He's an elite wide receiver in the league. I think both these guys are worthy buys, especially with what you look at these matchups for the playoffs. Coming in at number 4 is actually the team they played on Monday night. Again, you guys have the context of Monday night to be able to help you with your decisions. I'm just going off of what we've seen before this week as I'm recording this Monday night before the game. The Broncos have a great schedule. They get the Detroit Lions, who are 11th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, so not a great matchup. But then they go New England, who's 26th, and Los Angeles, who's 29th. So they get a similar actual finish to what the Bills have, but I actually think the Broncos is a little bit better because Detroit is a little bit worse than the Cowboys. And what I think is nice about these matchups is also Detroit and New England are great run defenses. So this forces the Broncos to have to look to the air and use Russell Wilson's arm. This is also an offense for the Broncos compared to last season that I think is much better. So I think we've got a higher floor here with these options to go to. The question is, who do you go to? So it's really between Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton. They're on the field more often than anybody else. Like even Marvin Mims elevating his role led to him being on the field for less than 50% of potential routes. So it's between these 2 guys. The outlook on the 2 is Jeudy is the one running routes from the slot. Sutton is the one running routes from out wide. And despite Jeudy running routes in the slot, he actually has a higher average depth of target, 14 yards to Sutton's 11. He's seen more deep targets, 10 to Sutton's 6. Sutton actually has more receptions of 20-plus air yards with 3 compared to Judy's 2. So he's actually doing more with less. And Sutton is the go-to guy when the team gets into the red zone. He's got 13 red zone targets, and his 8 end zone targets ranks 10th in the league. And those 8 end zone targets have turned into 6 touchdowns. For me, the Joe Lombardi offense, having seen it with the Chargers, having seen it with the Saints, the X receiver is usually the guy that is the one that produces the most, and that is what Sutton's role is in this offense. So if I was going to target anyone here, it would be Courtland Sutton. I think he can definitely produce in these matchups, but Jeudy could be a decent buy as well. These guys are going to be coming pretty cheap. They haven't done too much the last couple of weeks, so I like either one of them, but I would prefer Sutton. The third easiest schedule for fantasy wide receivers goes to the Baltimore Ravens. They have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 25th in fantasy points allowed to the position. San Francisco is 27th, and Miami is 18th. I don't necessarily think any three of these teams are bad defenses, but what they do is force you to throw the football. Jacksonville and San Francisco are great run defenses. Miami's not too bad either. The question is, who do you want to target in this offense? Mark Andrews is the consistent dominator of target share, of consistency in his production. So he is someone you can absolutely target even though he doesn't play the wide receiver position. Bateman, Beckham, and Aguilar are three guys that are kind of rotating in. Their route participation isn't very high. Odell managed to see 1 target, 1 receptions, 40 yards, and a touchdown to save his week, even though Bateman and Aguilar were on the field in a similar amount. Bateman was on the field, I think both of these guys actually were on the field more than Beckham was this past week. Who sticks out as the top option, obviously, is Zay Flowers. He's being treated as the wide receiver 1 in this offense. His route running obviously has that clear. He's consistently on the field for the vast majority of Lamar Jackson's dropbacks, and he's seen 6+ targets in 5 of the last 6 weeks. Had the big dud, or had back-to-back duds in weeks 9, 8, 9, but bounced back pretty decently here in week 10. Didn't put it into a huge day, but a pretty decent floor. Flowers is a guy that's not going to score a lot of touchdowns. Just with his size, he's not one to make contested catch plays and be that big red zone threat. But what he can do is take advantage of those high-volume passing situations. And that's exactly what these teams are going to give Baltimore, I think. So I think Flowers is the guy you do want to ultimately target. And Beckham would be my number 2 guy to go to in terms of he's been able to do quite a lot with very little. And we're going to see more volume in these matchups that could make him really interesting, especially from that touchdown scoring perspective. Of Flowers is the guy you want to go get. Number 2 is the Arizona Cardinals. And there's no better time for this team to be discussed than right now with Kyler Murray entering the fold. But the schedule, San Francisco, 27th, Chicago 16th, and Philadelphia dead last, 32nd. What I like about these as well, all 3 of these teams are top 10 in EPA against the run. So you're going to see pass volume from this Cardinals team in these games. And 2 of these 3 teams are far better than the Cardinals are. So the passing game script will be there with a much better quarterback, because the boosted QB cannot be understated. That's very valuable for us. I think people are really underestimating what Kyler brings to the table for their passing game. In week 1, with Murray at quarterback this season, with obviously a brand new coaching staff, it was Trey McBride that had the biggest beneficiary of Murray's arrival. He went 9 targets, 8 receptions, 131 yards. So something to keep in mind. McBride has been the one in week 1, but the sample size is small. Marquise Brown, we look at last season in his time with Kyler Murray. He was the wide receiver 19 in fantasy points per game with Murray starting. So he has a proven track record of with Kyler, obviously in the NFL, and then as well they played together at Oklahoma in college. He's someone that can certainly produce and is usually Murray's go-to guy. We did see from this past week, saw just 3 targets, but his average up the target was over 20 yards. So we're looking potential for some explosive plays. I definitely think that Chicago and Philly are capable of giving those up. San Francisco, not quite as much. What was surprising was to see the slot was where Murray was targeting his receivers, especially against Atlanta, because McBride and Moore are running the majority of their routes from the slot. And Rondale Moore had 9 targets in this game. Moore is a player that needs really significant volume to produce because his average up the target is so low. It's consistently the last couple of years amongst the lowest in the league. He could see volume in these games, definitely, but Moore is more of like that waiver wire guy. He's going to be on the wire practically every league. Something to keep an eye on, but wouldn't necessarily say he's the guy I want to invest in. I think at the wide receiver position, Brown does stick out again because of their history together, and these matchups are great. And I think Brown is the most talented receiver in the group. So I really think this is an intriguing opportunity with Marquise Brown to acquire him for this playoff run. And the best schedule for wide receivers in the fantasy football playoffs is the Seattle Seahawks. They get those Philadelphia Eagles, who I mentioned are dead last in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. They get the Tennessee Titans 27th and the Pittsburgh Steelers 28th. So we've got a bit of a crowded room here with Jackson Smith and Jigba seeing the field a little bit more. That's had an impact on what this offense looks like. It's definitely beneficial for the offense and beneficial for Geno Smith. But what does it mean from the fantasy perspective of who to buy for this team when it comes to investing in the postseason, helping you win that fantasy championship? Lockett and Metcalf have been far ahead from JSN, even with him arriving and getting on the field a little bit more. In terms of target share, these are the guys. DK, in the last 3 weeks, has seen 28 targets, over 9 targets per game on average, and his 9 end zone targets this season ranks 5th in the NFL. So he's getting tons of a good amount of volume in recent weeks, and then over the course of the season and last season as well, has consistently been a guy that gets plenty of end zone opportunities. Lockett, though, this is something that I think will help you make this decision. Super consistent, seen 5+ targets every single week since week 1. So he's consistently getting those opportunities. Whereas Metcalf, yes, 28 targets the last 2 weeks, but in between 2 massive target games, he had 14 and 10. He had like a 4-target game where he did basically nothing. That doesn't happen with Tyler Lockett. He gives you at the very least, a 6-7 point floor, where Metcalf can actually give you a close to 0. But when I mentioned that Metcalf is close to the top in end zone targets, Lockett actually leads the NFL in end zone targets. He has 11 end zone targets for 3 touchdowns. The big problem for Metcalf this season and last season was the fact he got end zone targets but could not convert them into touchdowns. He was one of the worst in the league last year. Both of these players as well, similar target share, right around 23%, and their deep targets. Both have 16 deep targets, which is tied for 7th in the league. Jackson Smith and Jigba, like the rookie, you're like, oh, late season breakout for a rookie wide receiver. I've seen this story before, but he's not getting these valuable opportunities. He's not seeing downfield targets. He has just 3 on the season. So I'm not there with Metcalf being the guy or JSN being the guy to break out in a really crowded room. Usually you see that when opportunity strikes, and for JSN, opportunity I don't think will really strike this season unless we see an injury, which I obviously cannot predict. I think Lockett's going to be your cheapest buy, because him and Metcalf are performing very similarly, pretty much identically, to be honest with you. But DK holds that tag of, hey, in the preseason, this was a guy that was being drafted as like a top 15 wide receiver. I'm seeing these big target shares the last couple of weeks. Lockett is consistent. He's seen a lot of these similar opportunities that are valuable, which is opportunity to score touchdown with those end zone targets and then downfield targets for explosive plays. So Lockett is the cheapest guy. Every season, he's a player that a lot of us are kind of just meh on. Like, I'm not very excited about it. The numbers bear out that Lockett is the guy with these matchups that will be able to return you the best on what a trade offer you throw out there, will give you, because I think Lockett can be acquired for much cheaper. So that'd be the guy I'd go with. But either one of these guys, I think, are solid trade options. Those are the 5 best schedules for fantasy wide receivers in the playoffs this season. Guys, if I missed any team and you want me to touch on them, or if there's any questions you have about any of these players and who you should be buying, or you have mocked up trades asking me if you should make them or not, drop those down below in the comments. Happy to answer them for you. If you guys enjoyed today's video, got some valuable information from it, would really appreciate it if you did hit that like button for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.